NFL podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Hussey, joined by Judah, Sam, and Drew. Drew, there's no better place to start. For the second week in a row, I am going to start this podcast by saying they called you a madman. It was the Patriots 2 weeks ago and the Broncos this last week, and they both came in the money line. I'm looking forward to a few apologies coming in the YouTube comments over the next hour or so.
Yeah, I'm surprised people haven't figured out the game is just pick the most impossible sounding handicap every week and make a case for it. And it's been lucky the last couple of weeks that the actual dog did win. But it kind of goes to our point of, is anyone good? I mean, we know that there are good teams in the NFL, but in any given week, people could play down. People can get the flu. Pat Mahomes is human. But no, I think it was a good, we're in a good run of form, as you say, and I'm enjoying the season so far, despite the fact that we have some LOL quarterback matchups this week. I did not expect that week 9 of the season we were going to be handicapping PJ Walker versus Clayton Tune. I didn't think we were going to be breaking down Jordan Love and Brett Rippon. I guess Aiden O'Connell is going to be going against presumably an injured Daniel Jones. And then maybe my favorite, we get Zach Wilson in primetime. I think 2 weeks in a row, Zach Wilson's going to play in primetime this weekend, next week. So that's something to look forward to. And then, of course, Jaron Hall, which is an interesting handicap against Taylor Heineke. And we'll get to that later.
Yeah, isn't it there Jets Raiders coming up, and they had the chance to move it from prime time, but it was confirmed yesterday that they didn't use that slot or didn't use that change slot, and Twitter isn't overly impressed with that, and rightly so, I would say. Sam, Drew mentioned, is anybody good? So just thinking out loud here, I'm going to throw this at you. It's a team that my team, the Chargers, they won Sunday Night Football. Sorry. Or is there a case for someone like the Chargers in the Super Bowl market to make a run? Like, it is still an open enough NFL season.
I definitely think it's open. I'd probably rather take a team in the NFC in terms of, I think there's probably more probability that they can rise the ranks a bit quicker. But ultimately, I still think it's very much open. I don't think there's any team that I feel is kind of bulletproof at this time. And the ones I've kind of started to get that feeling through the season have ultimately kind of shown up that they maybe aren't able to get past a couple of injuries or whatever. So, things are moving so quickly. I think this week, a mixture of obviously the firings, the trades, a lot of quarterback injuries. This is a really unpredictable week, I think. And there's a few teams that I'm really unsure of how they're going to look, whether that's the Vikings without Cousins or Washington without half their defensive line. I don't really know what's kind of those teams are going to look like. So I think it's very much this week is a really good opportunity to kind of obviously place our bets. We've got some really good ones, but take a step back and look at some teams that we can't quite figure out right now.
Yeah, it's exciting with all those question marks, like you say, Sam. Judah, brilliant week for you last week. Landed the best bet. Jags, alternative handicap, so -5.5, but also the Bengals doing the job against the Niners. So good week.
Yeah, and I think kind of what everyone's saying right now about playing this sort of uncertainty and a lot of kind of picking up on Drew's themes of last year of like the preseason does still matter, and that like should set some expectation of where we think teams will be. Like, I'm thinking about the Jaguars, and it's like they're in a position to be the number 1 seed, and we haven't even seen them play well, which is kind of crazy. And the Bengals, I think, was certainly that example case where it's like, now I feel like if we did a rematch of that game, the price would be entirely different. And I think it's like, okay, the Bengals are back. And I think trying to be a step ahead of where the market is going, obviously a lot easier said than done, but something that I'm personally, trying to keep in mind as I'm handicapping the rest of the season, trying to see the bigger picture within kind of a sea of noise, something we talk about all the time.
Yeah, it's a case of getting ahead of those market moves, as Judah alluded to there. So yeah, before we get going, guys, the 4 games we're going to cover on the podcast this week: Dolphins at the Chiefs, Frankfurt game, really looking forward to that. Seahawks at the Ravens, Cowboys at Eagles, Bills at Bengals. Please like and subscribe if you're watching on the YouTube channel, and for the podcast, hit a 5-star review on your various podcast platform. We will start with the Dolphins at the Chiefs, the Frankfurt game, and take a look at the betting that we currently have on the Matchbook Betting Exchange. You come back the Dolphins underdogs here at 2.22, Chiefs 1.74. The handicap currently sees Dolphins get a 2.5 head start at 196. The total for this is 51. We'll go to you, Drew, on this. So the handicap is 2.5. First of all, it's a brilliant occasion to finally get football to Germany and thinking of Suma. I'm not sure if he's going to the game or not, but he's very excited when we spoke last season about it. But your takeaways heading into this game, it's great to get a brilliant A-list game for an international one.
It is. And man, oh man, the implications here for one seed, playoff seeding, Dolphins, AFC East, MVP race, all really high leverage spots here. And should be a really, really good game. I probably should have just kind of stayed away from this one because the more I dig into it, the more I feel less confident in a Chiefs position here. But I think the fact that you're catching the Chiefs under 3 is a bet. Again, kind of going back to the preseason, we expected the margin here between these two teams on a neutral was going to be somewhere on the outside of 3. I mean, the look ahead was a little rich. It was like 5.5, which seems, maybe like it missed a little bit on how good the Dolphins were going to be. But just in general, you have a Chiefs team that I think matches up fairly well with the Dolphins defense. If there's one unit that's been a little bit underwhelming out of the 4 that are playing in this game, I think it's the Dolphins defense. I mean, Fangio may have these guys ready by the time we get to the playoffs, but right now they can't really stop much on the ground, which I think is an issue. So Chiefs having a little bit of a balanced attack, Pat Mahomes being a bit of a scrambling threat, and Travis Kelce having no answer for Travis Kelce in that secondary, I think all matters for the Dolphins. The Dolphins, it's worth noting, did travel to Germany earlier than the Chiefs. The Chiefs are doing a little bit of a get in, get out, which I hate for international stuff because you don't necessarily want to be starting slow, particularly against a Dolphins team that can front run like the best of them. So I think that's worth keeping track of, keeping an eye on, and going to need the Chiefs to not have one of these sort of jet lagged, lethargic starts to the game because this could be over before it starts. So Dolphins, I think their strength in the passing game matches up pretty difficult. They have a difficult matchup against the Chiefs secondary that's performing very, very well so far this season. Their coverage has been outstanding. And I think that's going to be nice strength on strength here. Dolphins, realistically, their biggest advantage in this game is their rushing attack against the Chiefs run defense, which has been a little ho-hum so far this season. But, I think some of the losses to the Chiefs linebackers are worth paying attention to. Nick Bolton definitely was playing very well. But ultimately, betting on Pat Mahomes and the Chiefs offense against a Dolphins defense that I think is bottom half of the league, at least as currently rostered, at least as currently playing. Like, they may get better. Jalen Ramsey may move the needle. Javon Holland, coming off of concussion protocol, may move the needle here, but I still think there are places you can attack this Dolphins defense pretty obviously, and I would expect Andy Reid has the good plays out on Sunday and does exactly that. So I laid it with the Chiefs at 2.5. I think fair here should be 3, and I think in general it's going to take more than what we've seen so far from the Dolphins for me to move them any closer than 3 to the Chiefs on a neutral. And I guess that's kind of where I land.
Okay, 193 currently Chiefs, -2.5 in Frankfurt. Sam, what about those points on the Dolphins defense in particular that Drew said? I mean, it's hard to argue out of those 4 offenses or defenses between the two teams. It's definitely the weakest of the field.
100%. And I'll be honest with you, when I first kind of looked at this game, I was probably siding similar argument. I think anytime you can kind of get Mahomes with a small kind of points handicap, it's generally kind of worth investing in that. But the more I look at this, I know Mahomes has had an incredible record in reacting to defeats in terms of, I think, 8 games in a row now, 1 after a loss. We know how good that Chiefs team can be at kind of pressuring the QB, which is obviously going to be essential against Tua. But the one thing that kind of swayed me and flipped my judgment here was, and Drew alluded to it, the arrival time within Germany. One thing we kind of learned from the London games was that, and again, how much of this is kind of really impacting what we see on the field and how much of it is kind of conjecture on our part is very much up for debate. But we did see that teams that arrived earlier in London performed better in London. I think across the board, all 3 of the earliest teams won. And in this case, the Chiefs are going to leave Thursday afternoon and arrive early morning on Friday, with the Dolphins already there. They left Monday and arrived very, very early yesterday morning on Tuesday. So I think that effectively 3 extra days of acclimatization, I really think that is going to matter. So for me, this is very much just based on what we saw in London. I'm taking the team that's kind of more acclimatized, has been there earlier, more prepared potentially. And I was going to take the Dolphins and the points, but I just thought if this theory's right, I think realistically they win outright. So it's probably worth me taking the money line in that sense.
Okay, yeah, 224 current money line price, and of course Judah doesn't do things half measures, so he doesn't push a +2.5 into a money line. He decides to completely flip the handicap and go -2.5 on the Dolphins here. So maybe a little bit on that that argument on the Dolphins defense, and maybe we saw it a couple of weeks ago against the Eagles. Are they good enough in an A-list game like this, Judah, to hang tough, hang in there, and then ultimately beat the Chiefs?
So I'll say a couple things here. Number one, I think this defense is getting better, and over the past couple of weeks, they've been about league average. I also would not underscore the importance of Jalen Ramsey, especially in this matchup, where I expect him to shift to the inside as we used to see him do a lot, and kind of try and play one-on-one with Travis Kelce, maybe have some safety help as well. But I think that's especially important in this matchup. The other thing, and I think Drew's right, talking about the Chiefs having a balanced attack, and that's the way to attack the Dolphins defense. That's precisely the issue, which is that if we're talking about the Chiefs not relying on Patrick Mahomes to win, but some other aspect of the game, I'm a little bit less bullish kind of on the Chiefs. That's kind of on the defensive side of things. I think when you kind of take a broad perspective looking at this game and seeing how the market has arrived at this 2.5 number, right? This is a neutral field. The Chiefs are not at home. I think you almost have to say that the Chiefs defense is a lot better, kind of as we've alluded to, than the Dolphins defense. But I don't think that really matters in a spot against the Dolphins offense, who have one game by my numbers with the combination of Mike McDaniel and Tua Tagovailoa. They have one game where they are below average on offense. That was that Sunday night game against the Chargers. And I think kind of the matchup advantage, or I guess market advantage that the Chiefs have on defense is kind of mitigated by the fact that the Dolphins offense is going to score. It doesn't really matter who's playing defense for them. I don't think anyone's mentioned that the Dolphins are going to be welcoming back 3 offensive linemen. I think that's especially important in the run game, where the Chiefs have really, really struggled. They've been a real run funnel, a lot easier to run against and pass against. And at the end of the day, I don't care who's playing defense. The Dolphins are going to have some success passing. So I think when you kind of take that broad perspective, I think the market is kind of mispricing how the Chiefs defense will play in this game. And I'm more than happy to kind of take the side of the Dolphins. You can't tell me I don't think that the Chiefs offense is so much better than the Dolphins, especially in its current form, that I'm more than happy to kind of lay the points with 2.5 here.
Okay, yeah. So difference of opinion. There seems to be disagreement throughout the 9 weeks of the Matchbook NFL podcast so far, and this is no different. We've got the Chiefs -2.5 for Drew, 193. Dolphins money line at 2.24, and keep an eye on the Matchup Betting Exchange. Particularly close to kickoff when we get those alternative handicaps more liquid. But the Dolphins -2.5 for Judah. So look, this is a brilliant game, and for us in the UK and Ireland, Sunday 2:30 p.m. I think it's going to be a pretty popular game for sure. We're going to go to the second game here, 6 o'clock Sunday, Seahawks at the Ravens, and take a look at the betting that we have on matchbook.com. Ravens very impressive over the last couple of weeks. Seahawks 3.25, Ravens favorites at 1.4. The point spread sees the Seahawks get a 6-point head start, and the total here is 43.5. So Sam, over to you on this one, and talk to us a little bit about the Ravens, because I wouldn't say sneakily good over the last few weeks, but they've just crept on more people's radars as the weeks have gone on, and now look potentially maybe looking at a long playoff run later in the season.
Yeah, I think definitely. I mean, if you kind of got all of our views on the Ravens week on week on week, we've gradually kind of become sort of coming round to them, more impressed with the defense in particular, some of the work on offense as well. But I just look at this handicap. I think it is absolutely spot on. That's why I've gone for Ravens money line at 1.4, which I absolutely hate that I've done that. I don't really like betting at that sort of odds, but ultimately, I think that handicap is pretty much there for me. So yeah, this is a team that are putting up big numbers, 93 points over the last 3 weeks. You had 31 against the Cardinals, 38 against the Lions, 24 against the Titans. We know what they can do on offense. Defensively, they've been absolutely fantastic, averaging just 15.1 points per game. So we know they're going to be pretty good there. They're far better against the pass and the run, which I think that's something that the Seahawks can kind of really hang their hat on. But ultimately, I just really, I worry about that handicap, so I need to stay away from the handicap. And I think the only way I can personally tackle this game is just taking on the money line. And I saw some ridiculous stat about Lamar being 17-1 against NFC teams on Twitter. I probably should have gone back through the numbers and seen if that's correct, because that seems wild to me. But yeah, I'm worried about this. So Ravens money line for me.
Yeah, Judah, with you on this, so like I mentioned, the Ravens been sneakily good at 6-2, and maybe the Seahawks have been sneakily good at 5-2. And on the money line side of things, you feel there's juice in there, 3.25 currently, which is around 9-4 in fractional odds.
Yeah, I think this is probably my hottest take. I think the Ravens are frauds. I think they've had one good game this year against the Lions, and I was very wrong about that, and perhaps I will be wrong again here. But by most of my numbers, which kind of try and divorce results and look at the fundamentals of how the teams have moved the ball, the Ravens have a terrific defense. And exactly when we look at the last 13th year, they're a 50th percentile offense, and that's building in a really tremendous game against the Lions. I think they are really propped up by the schedule they faced. And I think that Lions game was more of an aberration where, sure, they got off to a great start. And I think the game script kind of tumbled there. But I think the Seahawks, the real kind of evidence here is that their defense has been tremendous getting healthy over the last 5-6 weeks. Devon Witherspoon has really emerged as a pretty dominant corner. Their pass rush is towards the middle of the pack now in generating quick pressure. They were almost dead last over the first half of the season. They just added Leonard Williams. That should certainly bolster the case. But ultimately, this comes down to the market is pricing in a real Ravens premium, and I think it's just wrong. It's way off by my numbers. There's no specific matchup angle that's going to lead me here. I see this as the Seahawks offense can be every bit as good as the Ravens, and I'm willing to kind of play that angle where you can get different games of 6-point favorites, where it almost feels as though the winning team is a little more shocking or less shocking depending on the opponent. And I think the Seahawks, it would not be totally surprising, I don't think, for the Seahawks to kind of win this game, or for us to look back at this game in 7 weeks and say, wow, it's pretty crazy that the Ravens were 6-point underdogs. But ultimately, all this comes down to, I think the Ravens are materially overpriced. The Seahawks defense has been pretty good, and I'm willing to kind of play that variance with the Seahawks.
Okay, Drew, as someone who has been impressed with the Ravens over the last few weeks, are they fraudulent?
Well, I certainly wasn't impressed with the way that the Ravens closed the door on the Cardinals. That not recovering that onside kick is still, haunting. That was one of the most hellacious beats of the season.
-9, wasn't it, Drew?
Oh God! I don't want to talk about it.
Carry on.
But there are some things I think about the Ravens that are pretty difficult to argue against. I think Mike McDonald is a very good defensive coordinator. I think his just ability to evaluate what is this team that I'm going against, what are their strengths and weaknesses, how do I want to scheme against that with the guys I have available. Well, it's not a very hard puzzle with the Seahawks. Like, it's kind of all right there. Like, you want to make Geno Smith look bad, you play man coverage. You make him throw into tight windows where he's not as comfortable. He throws a lot more balls out of bounds, and he's just in general a lot less effective as a quarterback. I think the Ravens have enough of a secondary here to try to do that against a good wide receiving core for Seattle. That their defense can really kind of put a lid on what the Seahawks can come up with in terms of passing offense here. And then just having Roquan Smith on the field against the Seahawks running attack basically makes them stuck in mud, in my opinion. I think the Seahawks in general come in with a little bit of we want to be balanced. We want, we're going to have our, whatever the number is, 30 carries plus completions or whatever stupid nonsense Pete Carroll is said over the years. Like, they stick to that. They want to have a certain number of carries in a ball game, and I don't see that being an especially effective strategy against this Ravens team, particularly as well as Roquan Smith is playing this season. And so I think this comes down to laying the price with the Ravens if you believe their offense can succeed against the Seattle defense. And Judah's points are fair. The Seahawks defense has played a lot better in the last handful of weeks. But, they've done it against quarterbacks who aren't especially impressive. Like, congratulations, you turned PJ Walker over a couple times. I don't really know that you're going to be able to live with, your corners on islands against, a scheme that's a little bit more complex and a little bit more, but it is a little bit more capable of having kind of explosive plays if you can provide Lamar Jackson with protection. And I think that's kind of where ultimately I land on this, which is the Ravens. I believe their offensive line at full strength is going to be able to neutralize any type of pass rush, any type of, exotic blitz. You think back to the Seahawks Giants game, like the Seahawks defense was successful there because they brought really interesting and unique blitzes, and Daniel Jones was just staring at it like a deer in the headlights, and he had no ability to, kind of operate an offense because he was under pressure so aggressively. Well, can't pull that against this Ravens team. The pass protection is too good, and I think Lamar Jackson, given time, is going to be able to absolutely pick on, some areas of the field here against the Seahawks secondary that, is absolutely true that Devin Witherspoon is playing at a probably going to steal the defensive rookie of the year level. But I think ultimately this is Ravens or pass for me. I bet it at 5.5, largely because I kind of got the sense the market was going to go to 6 here. This is a decent spot for the Ravens in general. And this is a big step up in class here for a Seahawks team that I think might be average. And I guess the funny kind of thought exercise here for the Seahawks is like, if everything goes right for the Seahawks the rest of the season, they probably get the 6th seed in the NFC. If everything goes poorly for the Seahawks, they probably get the 6th seed in the NFC. Like, that's their range of outcomes for where they land in the playoff picture for me is super narrow because there's no good 7th team. And I don't think the Seahawks are good enough to beat the Niners. And I don't think the Seahawks are going to be able to compile more wins than the loser of Cowboys Eagles. So, they need to start, figuring out how they match up against whoever the 3 seed is going to be, which at this point, I think might be the Saints.
Okay. We have Ravens minus 5.5, 189 for Drew. The Ravens money line for Sam and a safer play, and the Seahawks on the money line 3.25 for Judah. That's 2 games in, and dear listener, I'm none the wiser on the 2 games. So hopefully one of the guys has lent you somewhere if you come in with any preconceptions. But I could be listening to those. These
I think
two.
The truth of the matter is, we're making some low confidence bets this time of year, and these high profile games is really where it comes down to. And I think realistically, if you kind of side with either one of us, there are kind of ways to make any of these opinions a little bit higher payout by combining some of the concepts here, right? Like, if the Ravens win, are they going to win by keeping the Seahawks under 13 points? Probably. If if the Dolphins win, is it because they can generate a lead and then kind of put the game away on the ground? Probably. So I think there's sort of some pretty likely sort of runaway game state combinations you can kind of put together from these 2 really high profile, really good games.
Yeah, agreed on that. And the alternative handicaps in the matchup betting exchange, particularly when it gets more liquid in the markets, well worth checking out close to kickoff on Sunday. Some fun alternative handicaps have been very profitable for the guys over the course of the season, as well as Drew alluded to. The big games keep on coming this week. It's Cowboys at the Eagles, Sunday, 9:25. This is a brilliant game now, I have to say. Cowboys 244, Eagles 164. The point spread sees the Cowboys get a 3-point head start, close to even there, 197. The total is 45.5, dropped a little bit from 46 earlier today. Judah, over to you on this one. Take it away. You don't have an official bet, but just talk to us a little bit about the handicap. Like we say this every week for the last few weeks anyway. The Cowboys are arguably the most inconsistent team in football right now.
Yeah, I think that kind of is what it comes down to. And also, we haven't actually seen a Cowboys game in sort of a neutral setting. They're either getting blown out and losing the entire game, or they're blowing out teams by 25. We haven't really seen them play what this should be kind of a type matchup. I think my concerns for the Cowboys are that they really don't have any secondary options outside of CeeDee Lamb. And he's been he's gone crazy the past couple of weeks, and that's kind of led the passing offense. I think they're struggling on the interior, on the offensive line, which is an issue against the Eagles. But on the flip side, I still have plenty of concerns about the Eagles. I think Jalen Hurts has been terrific kind of when the when he has 3.5 seconds to throw or 3 seconds to throw, and he can kind of dance around a little bit and wait for receivers to get open. I think that's a little bit less likely in a spot where Dallas just generates quick pressure at an absurd rate. We've got a couple of years of them at like 35, 40%. And if we're speeding up the timeline for Jalen Hurts to have to make plays, and now his receivers need to get open in 2.9 seconds as opposed to 3.3, that really, really matters. That I have a lot of concern about the Eagles. Perhaps if you're watching live and you see that the Eagles offensive line is handling the Cowboys, which is a real possibility. I think that's a spot to kind of look and lean into the Eagles, or we can kind of see what we saw in week 1 against the Patriots, where the Patriots defensive line is just completely overwhelming the Eagles. And I think that offense sputters a bit. So there's a lot, I think, of kind of different matchup angles that I don't have a lot of confidence in to take a side here. I think this game is probably fairly priced, but I am certainly fascinated to see what happens, even though I don't have any bets right now.
Yeah, like we keep saying, Judah, the Cowboys just seem every week they're so hard to predict. Sam, you are going to take the points with Cowboys, and what have you made from the last 3 weeks? Because there is serious potential, particularly in that offense. When they're on a roll, they're nearly as good as any team in football.
Yeah, I mean, when the Cowboys are good, they are good. But the problem is they don't reach that threshold quite as often as they really should do. I think, given some of the talent on the roster, both sides of the ball. But for me, I think the reason I'm backing Cowboys +3 here is twofold, really. Kind of following on from what you said, when Dak is hot, he is absolutely red hot. He was incredible against the Rams, 80% completion percentage, 4 touchdowns. Admittedly, the 1 interception, but it wouldn't be a Dak Prescott game without that. Really high passer rating, but it's that defense, isn't it? Last 2 games against the Eagles, they've restricted Jalen Hurts to just 31 rushing yards, and I think that's kind of such a huge thing. If you can take that ground game away from Jalen Hurts, then you're kind of really limiting what the Eagles can do there. So for me, it's kind of that, really. The Eagles averaging 2 passing touchdowns per game, allowed, that is, sorry, which against the quarterback of Dak's kind of ability, when he is hot, I could see them putting on a bit of a show, to be honest with you. So it's for that reason, really. The Eagles, I think we still think of them as being a particularly good defense because they have been in the past, but the reality is that they're not particularly anymore. Good against the run, admittedly, but they're not particularly good against the pass. In terms of passing yards allowed per game, they're sandwiched between the Broncos and the Colts, which I think kind of gives you an idea roughly on their level in that regard. And I'm not really worried if they take away the Cowboys' ground game because it's barely been there all season anyway. So if they're focusing on letting Dak throw, then I think that's going to be a hard time for the Eagles. And the 3 points, I was tempted to go on the money line as well, but I will just take the 3 points and play it safe. Yeah,
Drew, over to you on that point in terms of the passing offense for the Cowboys being able to get some joy against this Eagle defense. Is that where you're coming at that angle at?
A little bit. I mean, I still think the Eagles defense is probably a hair overrated by market. Like, for instance, their Unpredictable has the market ratings for the Eagles defense as 6th best, which is not close to where I'm at with these guys, particularly the pass defense. They have a unique sort of strength of wave after wave of defensive lines, combinations that they can bring at you, which makes them super effective at putting away leads, makes them super effective at really kind of flummoxing quarterbacks who don't thrive under quick pressure. But I think against the offensive line, the Cowboys, which is starting to get back to full strength, I think that's going to be tougher for them to be able to, kind of just flat out win one-dimensionally. And I think that's going to put their linebackers, their cornerbacks, their safeties under some pressure here. And I get what Judah's point was with CeeDee Lamb being sort of the only game breaker. Like, the fact that the Cowboys didn't, I don't know, call anyone for a wide receiver was a little bit frustrating because, the additional Brandon Cook certainly hasn't really been an especially effective piece. And Michael Gallup looks like unplayable almost. So I'm not exactly sure what, how they expect to continue to, mature the passing offense here. I do think they can count on Tony Pollard getting more effective as we go through the season. I don't think it's entirely a misfit of what his role is in terms of kind of giving him more of a workload, and it's just not being as effective this year. I think he's still suffering some of the issues from coming off of the injury he sustained in the playoffs late in the playoff cycle. So I think ultimately the offense for the Cowboys still has some ceiling that we haven't seen. But where I kind of mostly come down on this handicap is kind of looking squarely at the Eagles offense. They've played one good defense this season, and it was the Jets. And the Jets absolutely put a lid on them. I think the lessons that the Cowboys can take away from that particular game and sort of the exotic pass rush packages the Cowboys are able to manifest could be game breaking here. The Eagles can't really get it done in the part of the field where I think the Cowboys are vulnerable. The Eagles want to run the ball and they want to throw it over your head. Cowboys are outstanding at defending deep down, deep passing. And just in general, I don't think that, Hurts is going to have enough time to let those routes materialize, even if they do go in with a plan A with that as their strategy. So Jalen Hurts is, in my opinion, still dealing with some sort of limitations related to the knee injury as well. I think his rushing attempts trending down to the point where he only ran the ball 4 times last week is a bad sign for his ability to be a game breaker and out of structure here. So when it's all said and done, I think the Eagles offense is really where I zero in on. This unit looks like they can be exposed in this game against an elite defense. Cowboys are definitely able to front run with the best of them. So if they can get into a positive game state here on the road, I think that's hugely important. But ultimately, this is a game that I think should be under 3. I think it will come off of 3. I don't really fault anyone for taking the +3 instead of laying the money line, or taking the money line price with the Cowboys here, because it's probably going to be a competitive game. These usually are, but I think the margin of difference between the Cowboys at full strength here against an Eagles team that I think is a little bit overrated by market. The margin's just not 3 points, even with home field advantage here for the Eagles. So give me the Cowboys. I like the money line better than the +3 just because it's the game states where the Cowboys are playing from ahead. I don't see how the Eagles are coming back. So I think Dallas can march their way to NFC East. I got some Dallas NFC East already in pocket, and it's not all that crazy, in my opinion, to split a stake here between Cowboys money line and Cowboys to win the NFC East, just as a longer term bet, because Eagles go into their bye after this game, and then they go to absolute schedule hell. So they could take 3 or 4 losses here in the before we get to December.
Okay, yeah, it could be 7 wins each in a couple of weeks, as Drew alluded to there. He'll lock in the Cowboys 244 on the money line, currently on Matchbook. We are recording Wednesday afternoon in case that point spread does come off 3, but it's currently +3 for Sam at 197. We'll go to a good primetime game. They've been in short supply this year, at least big ones leading up to them. Bills 232 or 2.2, big move on the Matchbook betting exchange last couple of hours there on the money line towards the Bills. We are recording this Wednesday afternoon. Bengals 178. The point spread has changed from 3 to 2. It's now +2, 199. Getting excited watching these live changes. And the total for this has stayed pretty steady at over 48.5. So a bit of money there for the Bills. Judah, again, set this game up for us similar to the last one. You've no official bet, but look, first of all, it's great having a decent primetime game.
Yeah, that's for sure. I'm super excited to be watching this one.
Yeah, relish it. The next two Sunday night games. I'm looking at down the schedule. After Raiders Jets, it's Vikings Broncos. What are we doing?
And Drew, Russell Wilson. You can change these, can they? At least the Sunday night football games. I don't know how American TV works. I'm
speechless. I'm sorry, Judah. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. The Jets, TV ratings speak for themselves. I think that's that has to be the answer. But yes, certainly going to relish all the football we have, starting with the first, Frankfurt game, which is super exciting. But to set this one up, I think this is similar to the Dallas Philadelphia game, where there are a lot of moving parts. I think we don't really know where we should be pricing the Bengals, which is like they were kind of in no man's land. We just kind of push them like, okay, the Bengals are fully back. I think there's some sort of uncertainty there, whether the market has moved too far. yes, they're different teams. Like, let's not forget that this game in the playoffs last year was the Bills -5.5. Has so much changed from these two teams that it's worth such a huge move. I think that's just an interesting sort of marker of where things stood not so long ago, and I don't think that much has changed. All that is to say, I think the Bengals defense this year is a lot weaker. They were really a kind of strong link team. They had a lot of kind of decent players, very few bad ones. I think they lost a bunch of those guys in free agency, and I think we're starting to see the ripple effects of that. This is a team that's bottom 5 in explosive plays. That's a serious problem against the Bills, especially as the Bills kind of transition from this like 12 personnel, 2 tight end experiment that they had earlier this season, kind of leaning more into 11 personnel, getting Khalil Shakir on the field. I don't think that was kind of a fluke performance by a lot of the underlying numbers. He's actually really good. I don't think it's a fluke that Dalton Kincaid is getting better as the season goes along. Rookie tight ends historically really, really struggle and get better as the season goes along. I think that kind of is a lot of the problems for the Bills was the lack of options, similar to the Cowboys, a lack of options behind Stephon Diggs. I think we're starting to see kind of these secondary weapons emerging, especially guys who can win downfield, which is a real problem against the Bengals, who I think the strength of their defense is their pass rush, and I think Josh Allen can sort of mitigate that with his legs extending plays. On the flip side of things, the Bills defense right now, I don't understand the pricing at all. It's almost as if we're like, this is a unit that's been decimated by injury. And I don't think the market has caught up to that at all. They're still being ranked as a top 10 defense. I think it's a lot closer to kind of 16 to 18. And I think the Bengals are going to be able to score. All of this kind of leads me to liking the over here. I think this game in the 2022 context or 2021 context is a 51.5 total. Totals have been really pushed down this year, such that it's 48.5. But I think both of these offenses are going to be able to score pretty easily. I don't think either of these defenses are priced appropriately. That I'm leaning towards the over here, and it is another fascinating game that I am extremely excited to watch.
Okay, leaning over 48.5 is the current line at 192, but no official bet from Judah. Drew, a little bit of there's been that little bit of market move. It's now Bengals -2. You play -2.5, or at least your selection is. So talk to us a little bit. That is still a bet there, or worrying sign that when the market goes against you. It's always tough on Wednesday. It's finding that reason the market moves, isn't it, Drew?
Yeah, and now I don't have a good reason for it.
No.
I mean, maybe there's like a little bit of just a deflation on this opening pretty favorably in terms of the price on the Bengals, and people are just kind of correcting based on a lot of this kind of concepts we talked about last handful of weeks, which is the last time these two teams played in Buffalo, Bills were 6-point favorites, and there may be some people that are just kind of resistant to making this large of an adjustment, but I think it's actually perfectly warranted considering who the Bills have lost defensively. And I guess, Drew's points were all fair. I almost actually would say, if you like the over, look for a first half over here, because there's definitely a game state where if the Bengals have a lead going into halftime, they just kind of do what they did last year when they played in the playoffs, and then they just turn this into offensive line just pushing the Bills around. The tackling from the Bills in that game against the Bucs was like, it was wild how effective they made a very, very bad short passing and running offense look for Tampa. And I think that there is a decent chance the Bengals are going to kind of get whatever they want, however they want it in this game. The answers, the Bengals are at full strength right now, basically everywhere. That's pretty amazing. And I think the idea of whatever you thought this team was going to ultimately be at their best, you're going to see it now this next handful of weeks against really good competition. So it's going to make for the best. The Bengals are probably going to be the must-watch week in, week out here for the next month. And I think the fact that Burrow, the tape, don't kid yourself, the tape against the Niners for Burrow was outstanding. It was very, very impressive to see what he was able to do under pressure, what he was able to do out of structure. I did not know that you were going to get that quality of play out of him when, still there are pass protection issues here for this Bengals squad overall. So, the fact that they're at full strength, I think matters. The fact that the Bills are depleted defensively matters. And I think kind of key reason that I didn't mind laying the price here for the Bengals, and why I ultimately think, however the game state works out, the Bengals are still going to be in it to the absolute bitter end, is that Sean McDermott really still has not learned any lessons from his close losses to really good teams over the years. The fact that he does not have the killer instinct to put games away is a problem for the Bills. They are leaving good teams in games far too often. And if you leave this Bengals team at full strength in the game against you, it's very realistic chance that the Bengals are going to make you pay for that, particularly the fact that they're at home. So I think the Bengals, are going to be live till the absolute bitter end here. They can score against the Bills in comeback mode. They can put the ball away, I think, with the lead on the ground. So just basically there's not as easy a way back into this game for the Bills if they find themselves into a negative game state, which they've done now a handful of times this season. So I think Bengals laying the price is the right side here. Ultimately, the Bengals are just a absolute flashing green buy sign right now in basically every aspect, because the rest of the AFC teams all have flaws, and the Bengals are at least at full strength, and they were rostered to be one of the best offenses in football this year, and all of these guys are still available. So with a fully healthy Burrow, I think this Bengals team is, you gotta you can argue where you want them in your power rankings, but they got to be at or near the top, considering the way they were rated preseason.
Okay, slowly getting back to his best form, Burrow. Bengals -2.5, 198. Sam, high praise indeed from Drew on Joe Burrow, naming it outstanding, the tape last week. So are you in similar vein in terms of Joe Burrow right now?
Yeah, very much so. The two quarterbacks are kind of the reason why I'm taking the Bengals money line. And again, I've done what I did with the Ravens here and sort of gone slightly conservative and taken the money line rather than the spread. But I just thought, for the last couple of weeks, I've said I've been quite nervous about Burrow and how healthy he actually is. But I think the one thing that kind of really stood out for me last week was 43 rushing yards. Just that number alone, that was 3 times the amount he'd had for the rest of the season combined, which I think tells you that, one, it tells you a bit about the defense he was playing, but also I think it tells you that he felt a bit more safe and a bit more secure to do so. And if he's feeling healthy, then I'm all in, because I still think we spoke about Josh Allen earlier in the season, maybe not quite being at the level that he was last year. And I've not really seen anything to totally change my mind on that. He's been picked 8 times in 8 games. I think there's only been 2 games he hasn't been picked. And the Bengals, 10 interceptions already this season, despite not being a particularly great defense. So I think I'm just going to back the quarterback that I think is in the better form right now. And I was just so impressed by Joe Burrow. It was absolutely brilliant. And if this Bills defense was, as Jonah alluded to earlier, kind of fit and healthy, you had Matt Milano, you had Tre'Davious White in there, then maybe this is a different story. But they're not healthy. I don't think the market's adjusted for that yet. So I'm more than happy to take Bengals money line. It's 1.78 at the moment. So I'm getting a little bit of a hit there, but I still think that's a good price to be taking.
Yeah, Bengals 178, as Sam said, on the money line. Taking -2.5 is 198. Quick recap of what we've covered so far. So Drew likes Cowboys on the money line. Sam's Cowboys +3. Seahawks at Ravens. Drew's Ravens -5.5. Judah's Seahawks money line. And Sam's on the Ravens money line. And then disagreement in the first game, Dolphins at Chiefs. These are always fun to recap. Chiefs -2.5 for Drew. Dolphins -2.5 for Judah, and Dolphins on the money line. Is there a way all bets can lose there? Yes, there is. Chiefs win by 1 or 2 in the first game.
Our Polish middles have been something to behold the past couple of weeks.
We've avoided the real stinker though. Yeah. So far, we've matrix dodging bullets so far.
Yeah. It's just a Chiefs by 1, isn't it? In the last minute field goal. They're good fun, guys. We'll go to our any other bet section, which have definitely ramped up over the last couple of weeks in terms of winners left, right, and center. Judah. Maybe it's my bias here, but because of the extra hour, I got to watch the first half live of the Chargers against the Bears and was quite impressed with my Chargers, I have to say. Isn't this the case every year that Chargers just slowly go on, win 4 or 5 in a row? Next thing we sneak into a playoff and then blow a 27, 28-point lead in the playoffs.
It certainly seems that way. And I think kind of one of the lessons from last week was, if you give Justin Herbert any time, he's going to pick it apart. And I think the Jets are not that sort of defense. They are going to generate pass rush, which I will think make life harder. But ultimately, what this bet comes down to is this Jets offense is anemic. I mean, if you slice it up by the full season, the recent weeks, they have been absolutely dreadful. And I think that's kind of the main matchup advantage, which is that the Chargers defense is really bad. But if that opposing offense is not going to take advantage of the fact that the Chargers defense is really bad, I'm going to take the other side. I am more than happy to back Justin Herbert's ability to evade sacks and kind of create for himself. I think mitigates the Jets matchup advantage on defense. And I will also add this Jets pass defense, I think, is a tad bit overrated by EPA standards. This is a team that gave up a ton of yards to Jalen Hurts, generated 3 picks. And some of that's not necessarily random. But before last week, this team was 24th in defensive EPA against the pass. Granted, last week against Tommy DeVito really moved them up in the numbers, but I don't think this is as good a defense as their reputation suggests. Not to say they aren't a good defense, but all this to say I trust Justin Herbert's ability to avoid sacks, extend the play, create against this Jets defense that I am happy to fade the angle of betting on the Jets defense. And I don't think that the Jets offense is capable of kind of putting up points against the Chargers, which is really how they're losing all their games, is when the defense collapses. The Chargers offense is going to score.
Okay, let's go Chargers minus 3.0, currently 1.9. Sam, you're in agreement with there, so take it away. And then also taking on a low total, which you've had a bit of success with this season.
Yeah, so start with the Chargers minus 3. I pretty much what Judah said is my reasoning here as well. Ultimately, Jets D is good, but I don't for a second think they're going to be able to stop Justin Herbert putting up points. So the Chargers are going to be putting up points, which means it's going to turn into a shootout. And if it's a shootout, do I want to back the guy who's just come out of a game in which he had a 47.2% completion percentage? No, I don't. He's only had an above 50% completion percentage in 3 starts so far this year out of 6. He's just frankly not very good. That offense isn't particularly good with him under center. So for me, it's just as simple as that. I think if you're going to get into a shootout, you can't have a dud quarterback on your team. So I think the Chargers will easily cover the minus 3. And my final one is, as you mentioned, something I've done a couple of times this year. I think it's been fairly successful. So we're going to go back to the well. Sort of daily or weekly look out for the kind of effectively a bit of a stinker game. Find the one with the low total, whether it's the lowest or one of them, and kind of go the opposite way to the market. And looking at Giants at Raiders here. So the line has dropped from 38.5 to 37 since opening. And I think this is very much kind of an area of public perception. We obviously have Josh McDaniels out at the Raiders, and I'm a big believer to sort of take a Premier League English soccer parlance, but the new manager bounce, and I think kind of getting the new head coach in there, Antonio Pierce, in the interim will kind of give that team a bit of a boost. Aidan O'Connell, I know he didn't have a particularly good performance when he started in week 4, I think, but he looks fairly decent when he came in week 7 and in preseason. And I hate the fact I'm going back to preseason, but he looked superb at times. So I think there's a chance we're going to see an improvement there. We're going to see a new coach bounce, and Davante Adams will almost certainly get more than 1 reception this week. So either way, those are things that all make me trend towards points for the Raiders, certainly more than what's projected. And on the Giants side of things, Daniel Jones is clear to play. He's going to be coming back, and he is, despite not being particularly good, he is definitely an upgrade on Tyrod Taylor and or Tommy DeVito. So for me, this is one. Look, if the public's going one way, I'm going to go zigzag the other way and take the over on 37 points.
Yeah, Sam, I always wish you the best of luck with these low overs, but I did think of you when the Titans were throwing the touchdowns left, right, and center last week. So fair play. And please tell me Tommy DeVito is Danny DeVito's grandnephew in the comments there. Drew, is there danger?
Might as well have been the way he played.
Yeah. Drew, is there a danger the New Orleans Saints are actually a really, really good football team?
No, but they're good, and they're playing against a lot of really bad football teams between now and when we get to the end of the season. So I don't think it's out of the range of the possibilities that the Saints win out, just because that's how weak their schedule is. In fact, the only good quarterback left on their entire schedule is Jared Goff. Everyone else is bottom And in fact, as we get later in the season, we may be playing some teams that are literally kicking the tires on QB3, QB4. So Saints are really positioned well to win the South, I think. Laying 7.5 against the Bears may sound like a lot. This has moved across 7. This has been a pretty aggressive adjustment based on the last week's performance that the Saints put on tape. But I think it's warranted. And realistically, the Saints defense is good enough to keep the Bears scoreless here. So really, I think laying 7.5 just means you need the Saints to score 8. So the Bears have invested in their defense. I won't be surprised if they play better down the stretch, but we've seen the Bears have been beneficiaries of, I think at least the way that their defense is being rated by market is maybe a little bit, at the behest of playing some games in bad weather and against some bad quarterbacks. And I think Carr can, continue the Saints winning ways here. And I think 7.5 is going to seem like a cheap price in a couple weeks.
Okay, that's Saints minus 7.5, 193 against the Bears, as Drew alluded to. We'll move on to best week 9 long shots. Looking at the best record there below on your screen in the P&L since we started this in week 3. Sam plus 14.42, 3-3. Judah 3-4 at 2 selections 1 week plus 54. Drew, we're going to start with you at 5-1 plus £257, and those numbers are incidentally if you put a £20 stake at 2% commission. So Drew, you're going with the Vikings, obviously. Kirk Cousins, I'm hurt, out. So take it away on the money line and why you still think that's juice in that price.
Yeah. Can the Falcons lose to a first-time starter 2 weeks in a row? Sure. I think the news that Heineke is taking over for Ritter is probably not great. I mean, Heineke, I think, is probably better than Ritter. Maybe not in the long term in terms of what you want to do with the Falcons, but for a single game sample, is it Falcons more likely to win this game with Heineke in there? Probably, but I think the market and the adjustments made on the Vikings are kind of ignoring the fact that the Falcons' offense is still not especially good. Even with a better quarterback in there, there are still some pretty clear structural issues here, and the Vikings' defense has been playing quite well. I think the Falcons' defense is, they are starting to get a sense of how you want to attack that unit, particularly, in terms of like, what is a strategy that will work here. And I think the Vikings with, a young quarterback in Jaren Hall, who's not an especially impressive passer, probably come in with a slightly conservative game plan, but a game plan that relies on his athleticism and getting him out of structure running, as opposed to, trying to just stand in the pocket and make plays down the field. So I think the Vikings are a little bit of an unknown quantity in terms of what you're going to get from them offensively, which is to their benefit in this game. And you literally just need Vikings, I think, to avoid the key turnovers here, and I think they're going to be in this one at the end. So like the way they're being coached this year, like the way that the offensive line for the Vikings is playing, like the way that the defense is performing right now. And I think if there's one dog that is going to be live, it's Minnesota this week.
288 current money line. Interesting if that moves before Sunday. Currently recording Wednesday afternoon. Judah, Commanders minus 2.5. They were good for a large part of that Eagles game last week, and you fancy them here. 2.8. That price is at the Patriots.
Yeah, I really can't understand how the Patriots are a field goal plus favorite. Yes, the Commanders just traded some of their defensive line away. Their defense was already really bad. I'm not sure how much worse they are going to get. Similar to the Jets, this Patriots offense has been anemic all year. I'm not sure they're going to be able to take advantage of this matchup. This is a team which really, no matter how you slice the data, has struggled. Mac Jones has been terrible from a clean pocket, from a non-clean pocket. When he's in the pocket, when he's not in the pocket, he's just bad. And I think this offense has struggled as a result. I think what this mainly comes down to, though, is the Commanders made a shift in their pass protection, starting to drop 7-8 guys. And it's not a coincidence, I don't think, that Sam Howell took no sacks last week. And I think if you, especially with the Patriots man coverage scheme, with corners who really can't back up that scheme against Terry McLaurin, and finally we saw Jahad Dotson with his emergent game. I think if you drop back 7-8, as the Commanders have done, eliminate a lot of these sacks that Sam Howell's been taking, he's going to generate a lot of kind of splash plays, especially against this Patriots defense. That ultimately, I think this Commanders offense is probably a little bit mispriced projecting forward, assuming that Sam Howell is going to cut down on his sack rate, as I think he will from the schematic change. All this, though, I really, really can't understand how the Patriots are market ranked right now as the 22nd best team. And you can argue about power rankings 22nd, 24th. I think they should probably be like 28th or 29th. And I'm more than happy to take the points with the Commanders here.
Okay, mispriced in the opinion of Judah, -2.5 on the Commanders, 2.8 as he alluded to there. And Sam, game we talked about here, so we won't spend too long. But Cowboys, you're going to do the alternative handicap here, -4.5, which is 5-2 in fractional terms, or 3.5 on the matchup betting exchange.
Yeah, so I think I'm taking a bit of an alternative line just to go long on the Cowboys here, -4.5 points. Talked about it earlier, but I think this is a team that kind of, when they are hot, and they can definitely get away from the Eagles if they kind of get a lead and they manage to build on that. Out of their 5 wins so far, 4 of them have been 20+ points. They've been absolutely dominant at times, and I think I'm happy to take this alt line because I think if they do win, then there's a good chance they win quite big.
Okay, Cowboys -4.5, as I said, 3.5. Best bet time here. And Drew, you're in the same game here, so go to you first. So be brief enough. But in terms of the matches that you liked out of the 4, it's Cowboys on the money line, 2.48 is the current price.
Yeah, I think Cowboys can score here. You're up against a team that's conceding 31 points regularly to the Commanders. And I think just in general, Cowboys playing from ahead seems likely. Cowboys defense matches up well against the Eagles offense that really has had a tough time stepping up when they've gone playing an elite defense so far this season. So all the signal here is telling me that, in the same sentence, you need to be buying Bengals because they're fully healthy and they are a top 3 offense. I think you need to be selling Eagles. And they're going to take some lumps here, particularly as long as, Jalen Hurts is out there limping. So Cowboys money line, 2.48 is about as good as you're going to find. I think this closes in the 2.3 range.
Oh, wow. Okay. Keep an eye on that market, on that money line, the matchup betting exchange. Sam, it feels like the Cardinals are 8 or 9 point underdogs every week, and you're going to play them with the Browns -8.5. So take it away.
Yeah. We spoke about this briefly before we kind of came on air, and I don't feel confident doing this, but ultimately, yeah, I hear Drew laughing. But so my reasoning here is, as much as I think PJ Walker is not particularly good, and it looks like we're not going to have Deshaun Watson back this week, at least. There's some sort of, I don't know what's going on behind the scenes there, but it does seem quite murky. But before, obviously, a 7-point loss to the Ravens this past week, the Cards had 4 double-digit losses in a row. And I just think this defense is going to be too good for them. Ultimately, they got rid of Dobbs. Probably did the right thing for the franchise in the long run in trading him. But that means you're going to have Clayton Tune starting this week. And this is a guy that they gave him a chance in preseason and they didn't think he was good enough. So they got Joshua Dobbs involved. So do I really have faith that he's going to be the guy that could help them overcome the Browns team that are ranked 2nd in defensive DVOA, who've allowed just 260 yards on average per game? Again, that's the league best. 163.3 passing yards per game, a league best. And even on the grounds, they're 7th best with 96.7 rushing yards per game. So this is a very good defense. I have no faith in Tune being able to kind of do much in the air. And again, we don't have Connor as running back. It's DiMercado. And I don't really think they're going to be particularly able to destroy the Browns on the ground either. So for me, this is very much just I'm on the Browns defense. I'm not anywhere near PJ Walker, and I'm just against what the Cardinals are going to do with a sort of backup starting for them. So yeah, Browns -8.5 for me.
Okay, 195 current price on the matchup betting exchange. Judah, elephant in the room was Drew was right on the Texans. You guys were wrong. But you're going back to the well on the Texans this week. I love it, Judah. I'm looking forward to this case immensely.
Right back to the well with the Texans. Yeah, I think last week, was a struggle and kind of a perplexing loss for this offense. But I am more than willing to kind of look back at the larger sample we have of the early season play to suggest this offense is a lot better than their performance last week. And I think a lot of this has to do with, number one, fading the Bucs, who I don't think the market has correctly reacted to over the last bunch of weeks. By my numbers, they are, if you made a graph of offensive and defensive efficiency, they are clearly in the bottom left quadrant of teams bad on both offense and defense, suggesting they are a bottom team. But I think this is the perfect spot for the Texans. I think the two kind of areas where you want to be betting on the Texans are, number one, teams that can't generate a quick rush. CJ Stroud splits with a clean pocket versus a messy pocket or out of structure is vast. He's one of the best in the NFL, if not the best from a clean pocket. The Buccaneers are the fourth worst in generating quick pressure. He should have plenty of time. And CJ Stroud has really excelled throwing deep this year. I think a lot of that's a function of his receivers who can win deep, but the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have been extremely prone to explosive plays, allowing them on nearly 10% of plays, also top 5 worst in the NFL. That kind of combine these angles of the fundamentals and also the fact that these two kind of areas in which CJ Stroud has been great, which is the clean pockets and throwing deep, and he hasn't necessarily had those matchups in the past, but all of that kind of leads to a spot where the Texans should succeed at home. I think this is a clear bounce back spot for him.
Okay, yeah. Fading the Bucks at 2.06, Texans -3. Cowboys money line for Drew, and the Browns -8.5. Thanks for all the kind words on YouTube, Drew. Very briefly, there's been no hate towards your long shot, so for me, I probably won't be backing it because it builds up a little bit more for
Stay away from the Vikings this week, guys.
Yeah, well, and I really liked your case.
Run off the field.
Yeah, and I didn't like your cases the last 2 weeks, Drew. So I don't know what to do. Now, guys, really fun as always.
Regression comes for everyone. You know that.
It does. It's coming. It's coming, Drew. It's coming. Long season ahead. Insights.matchbook.com. Full recap. Particularly fun to have a look at the guys' selections. Pre-red zone all the way up into those primetime games. My thanks to Drew, Sam, and Judah. We'll be back same time, same place next week. Until then, enjoy the football of having a bet in the match with Bet and Exchange. Take care.